Hello, my name is Nicholas Garcia. Thank you for joining me for a brief presentation on theoretical frameworks and the two that I've chosen for potential use for my Doctorate of Nursing Practice project. So a little background about my potential project. It's estimated that the Hispanic population makes up approximately 17.9% of the U.S. population, estimated to be 57 million Hispanic residents living in the U.S., so it's a sizable population. The U.S. Census Bureau has declared them as the biggest ethnic minority population in the United States, and they are affected disproportionately compared to their Caucasian counterparts in terms of metabolic syndrome, which is a handful of risk factors that lead to cardiac disease and other chronic illnesses such as diabetes type 2 and other stuff. So some studies are suggesting that culturally tailored education can improve health literacy among Hispanic adults in regard to metabolic syndrome. So with that being said, we want to apply that directly to this this population or this particular research project. However, in order to do that, we need the right theoretical framework so we can systematically approach this, and it can drive and really give the project structure. The question that I'm asking is, will a culturally adapted health education for Hispanic adults improve metabolic syndrome health literacy over a 60-day period of time? And there is a lack of randomized controlled trials and meta-analysis in regards to this particular subject in particular, but the stuff that is out there is promising. However, in order to implement, like I said, we have to choose the right theoretical framework, and we have to ask the right questions to begin with. So when I was choosing my theoretical framework, obviously I wanted something in the mid-range theory that's has general applicability, but still measurable. It's not like the low-range or micro-range theories that are really tied into a very niche or limited part of nursing, right, or healthcare in general. So that mid-range theory has the general applicability, and a lot of the theories that are out there for the questions that I'm asking are not nursing based in terms of origin. They might be in the psychology realm or even the business realm, but they have, like I said, they're mid-range and they have this general applicability potential, so I went with them. So the question I was really asking is one of two things. I was saying, when I choose this theory, is it about, is the population ready for change? So I was looking at change theory, or are there social issues affecting their learning or impeding the learning process? Because it's, the obvious question is, if the information is there and it's promising and it shows efficacy, then why aren't people doing it? Well, it could be they're not ready for change, or there's cultural or environmental issues that we have to consider. So that's why I'm looking at change theory, Lewin's change theory, or Bandura's social change theory. So let's look at Lewin's change theory. Kurt Lewin was a German-born social psychologist, and he created the change theory in the 1940s. It was based on the concepts of driving and restraining forces behind the change. So driving forces are those things that are the motivations and the things that are moving us towards this change, and the restraining forces are all the forces that would impede, or the obstacles that would keep this change from being successful. And Zaccagnini and Watt and White state that until the driving forces exceed the restraining forces, change will not occur. It's based on 3 stages, which are the unfreeze, the movement, and the refreeze. And the unfreeze is the change, the the break from status quo, and without real change agents and a real good motivation motivation behind this change, then buy-in is hard, and also it makes people uncomfortable and just generally anxious, right? So and then there's the movement phase, which is the change agents facilitating this, especially after buy-in, and we don't, and really we don't want to go into this phase until, again, the driving forces exceed the restraining forces. And then after this is adopted and this has been in practice for a while, then the refreeze occurs, and then this change has become the new status quo. One thing I wanted to say about Lewin's change theory is there's a number of extensions or newer theories that really have Lewin's underpinnings in them. Cotter's 8 stages is one of those. The other theory that I was looking at, and again it has to do with environmental factors, are the human condition really is, again, the information's out there, so why aren't people doing this? Or so Bandura looks at the social learning, or how people learn, right? So in the 1970s he created this. It was based on the concept of reciprocal determinism. Bandura considered the social influences that affect learning, such as culture and ethnicity, and that is particular interest to me because I'm looking at a very distinct culture that's has very distinct cultural beliefs and traditions that are different than a lot of the American dominant Western social medicine. So and ideas of what health is. So that might play a role. So in this theory, environment, cognitive factors, and behavior interact with one another, so each variable affects the other two, according to McEwen and Wills. Bandura believed that learning is acquired through observation, imitation, and modeling, such as a child watching a model as anybody that kind of teaches or demonstrates a behavior. So the model is maybe how a little girl watches her father treat her mother, so then she maybe looks for a husband with similar qualities, or watching her mother brush her little sister's hair, so then she starts to do it with her own dolls, etc. And then they'll imitate those behaviors, right? And possibly if they see something in that model or that role model, they might adopt those behaviors in terms of the long term. Bandura recognized that the learner is an active participant in their learning process, so there's a lot of cognitive processing going on as the learner observes their models and role models, and there's a time between the stimuli and the response where this processing occurs and this evaluating occurs to whether the learner wants to imitate those behaviors or not, based on the reward or the potential consequence, negative consequence. And this process is called mediation, and this mediation considers 4 variables: the attention, which is the extent to which one is exposed to the behavior. So how if I'm exposed to a certain behavior over a long period of time, obviously after a while it's going to grab my attention. Retention, or how well the behavior is remembered. Obviously I have to create a memory out of this or recall how to do this. Otherwise I'm not going to adopt it readily. Reproduction is the ability to perform the ability the model has demonstrated. So in other words, can I even do what I'm seeing? Watching my dad growing up working on cars, and even if it was of interest to me, maybe I just don't have the know-how, so I might discard it, or I might put interest in it and, might motivate me to mess around with cars more or learn more or look stuff up more. Motivation is the will to reproduce the behavior, and that might be based on the rewards and the punishments or negative consequences that come with those imitations or behaviors. Bandura also expanded on his models, or his theory rather, and created something called a self-efficacy model. And this is one that I'm particularly interested in because this one, it begins as learner or as teacher driven, and then it promotes self-confidence, and then becomes very much learner driven at the end. It's really based on the concept that the nurse is supposed to promote a patient's independence and confidence through this theory. And we see that very much as a contemporary thing in our modern day society, where we in order for someone to be discharged to home, we want to make sure that they can do these behaviors. So we ask for some sort of teach back or something like that. So anyway, it promotes the participants' independence as much as possible, but considers the human condition or human behaviors. It is a reliable middle range theory that will allow the researcher to interpret, modify, and predict patient behaviors. And this, again, is particularly important to me because I'm looking for sustained change. I would like to promote health literacy through some sort of culturally tailored educational effort. And I would, we don't want to see the small victories of, an increase in health literacy, and when the research project ends. We want to see sustainability, and I think that's through a process through self-efficacy, or maybe through change readiness. Here are my references. Thank you very much for your time.